You're in the right place. We're going to learn about AppScript here. And AppScript, just in case you didn't realize this, it exists across the Google workspace. So this course will be primarily focused in the back end of Google Sheets, because that is where I'm going to focus all of our data crunching and like pulling things into Sheets and doing stuff with it from in there. But AppScript is a coding language that's built into Google Workspace, so things like Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Forms, Google Slides, Google Chat, all these things have the ability to be connected to each other and to share data between each other because of AppScript. So if you've ever been limited or you've wanted to do a little bit more behind the scenes in like spreadsheets or in your Gmail or in your calendar, and you want to sync them together, this is exactly what you've been looking for. This will get you started. It'll get your feet wet with some practical real world examples. And the first thing I want to do in this video is give you a lay of the land of AppScript, because it can be confusing. When I was first starting, it was very confusing. In fact, just finding the right documentation pages, for some reason, I couldn't always manage to do that because there's so many things in so many different places. It's just kind of information overload. Now, this is simpler today with the use of AI tools, but I would argue that we still need quite a bit of knowledge going into using those tools just so we know how we're piecing things together. We can spit out a ton of code automatically, but if we don't know where to put it or what to do with it, it can be more problematic than it's worth. So let's get started with a blank canvas here. Here is a vanilla, nothing in it at all, just created Google Sheet. I don't even have a title here. So, Sheet 1. Let's give it a generic, terrible title. So what I want to do here is give some very rudimentary examples of how we are making automations happen in Google Sheets, how they're being tied together with AppScript code in the backend, how you can make shortcuts to execute those things, and then just give a sneak peek of the world of possibilities and where to find some of the code that underlies all of the things that we're going to continue to be building together. First thing we need is we don't even have to have anything particular. We just need some data in here. I'm just throwing some blank data or some generic data in here just so we have something to look at and work with. I'm even going to change the font because I don't want to look at Roboto font right now. And the first thing I want to do is show you what a macro is. And this will tie in very nicely to AppScript in just a second. If you look up here in the extensions menu, we've got some things that you may or may not have ever used. This is where we can add add-ons like third-party software to strap onto Google Sheets. You can see I've got a few of them down here that I've played around with. Then right underneath that, we have macros, and then underneath that, we have AppScript. We're not going to look at Apps Sheet or Looker Studio. Those are some more advanced options that I may cover in future tutorials. Let's go ahead and click on macros for right now. And the only option I have, because this is a blank new worksheet, is record macro. This allows us to record a set of actions and then basically play them back again. So if I were to come up here and highlight these first 5 cells, this first row of this table, and then let's just do a couple things to it. Let's set bold font, 14 font size, and I don't know, some red background, just so it's blatantly obvious that we've done something here. You can see down here, it says recording new macro. And it's also using absolute references. So I'm going to click Save. I'm going to call this Style 1, and then I'm going to put the number 1 here. This is an optional keyboard shortcut. So instead of clicking through the menu, I can just do Control-Alt-Shift-1, and it'll execute this macro. Now, let's see the 2 different ways to execute it. As I just said, we could go back up to the extensions menu, and we could say Style 1. And it says right up there, running script, and then authorization required. Now this will run the first time you run one of these scripts in your spreadsheet. It's just saying, hey, there's some stuff happening, and are you sure you want to run this? We can absolutely click through on this because we're the author of this code. This is a safeguard in case you have code that came from somebody else. So don't worry about that. Just click through, click your account and say, yes, run this code. Now nothing has changed here after we ran that because we used absolute references. So let's come back up here to this macro. Let's manage the macros. let's remove this one and update it. So there are no macros. I'm going to highlight that second row and I'm going to paste the format so we're back to where we started. So let's come back up here now, record another macro, and instead of absolute references, remember that's just going to always do that first row, I want to use relative references, okay? So I'm going to highlight this first row. Let's make it bold. Let's set it to 14, and let's put our red, actually let's go orange this time, background, save the macro, style 1, 1, save. Now, if I come down here and I highlight row 4 and I do Control-Shift-1 or Control-Shift-Alt-1, check that out. So it is repeating those actions that I saved in that macro. If I come over here, it doesn't have to be in a table. It could be any 5 rows. Let's select these right here and select extensions, macro style 1. Well, it's going to do the same thing right here. And you can see it is that 14 bold font. Now, if I come down here and select one cell and I run that script again, it is still going to intuitively do it across all 5 because that's what I did on that first one when I wrote the macro. Okay, this is basic, right? You could do any number of things. You could record the macro, save a bunch of them in here, have a bunch of keyboard shortcuts so that you can run those macros. Let's go over now into Google Apps Script where we can see what is actually happening to make these style changes. So if I go to Extensions, Apps Script, now if you've done any coding, you'll be familiar with this basic layout here. This is a code editor where we have code that we can write on these lines. They're numbered down this column so you can easily reference what line your code is on. Over here, we've got some other different menus that we'll cover in further detail here in a little while. For right now, though, I just want to look at what's written here. This is already inside of our app script. We've got 2 functions. Why do we have 2? Well, it's actually already saved that first one that we put in here with this absolute cell reference. See where it says A2 through E2? This is the first macro, this whole little section right here, this function that I'll collapse. And then this whole little section right here, lines 11 through 17, is the second macro that I just did. Even though I deleted the macro, I removed it from our menu out here. If I go back here and do manage macros, I only have style 1, this one that I redid because I had removed that other one. Even though I removed it, it's still saved into memory in the AppScript file. Just a curiosity and something to be aware of in case you're using that macro menu to have AppScript write code for you. I am going to delete that first setup right here so we can only be focused on what is right in front of us and what is active in our spreadsheet. I'm going to press Control-S to save, just like in Word or some other desktop application. It will save anytime you hit Control-S. Anytime you make a change, if I write some stuff down here, you can see right here on the top of the bar, I've got this little save icon that says, hey, you want to save that? And I can save it manually by clicking, or I'll make another change and do Control-S to save it again with the keyboard shortcut. So let's talk for just a minute about what's happening inside this app script. This is a code that's been written for us based on what we did, but it's fairly easy to parse out what it means. We've got this syntax that you may not be familiar with, but it's not all that strange when we go through it line by line. So first of all, we have this declaration of a function. So style 1, our macro that we created back here in the menu, that is in AppScript language, a function. And so the way you write a function is you say literally the word function followed by the name of the function. Then there's these parentheses right after the name. This simply means that in order to run this function, it's not going to require any additional information from the user. So in some other instances, we may need to pass in some information for the function to actually work. So we would have a variable in here, and we'd maybe have 2 or 3 variables. And those things would be used by style 1 in the lines underneath it in order to execute what we want it to. For our purposes, we don't need any of that. We just need it to run, because down in the body of this function, in the instructions of this function, we're going to be telling it exactly what we want it to do. So the first thing we do is we say variable spreadsheet. That's what this var means. It's saying we're declaring a variable. We want to say that this variable named spreadsheet, just like we had a function named style, this variable named spreadsheet is going to be equals to this spreadsheet app spreadsheet.get active parentheses end parentheses. All right, I'm just going to delete that for a second and show you what happens when we declare a variable on our own. So there's these helper functions or these helper lines that will start popping up when you start typing in AppScript. And as soon as I type the letter V, these different options come up. Do I want a variable? Do I want void? Do I want data view? And so I want variable, and I want to name that spreadsheet, and I want it to be equal to something. Now, again, as soon as I start typing a letter, all these different things start coming up. Now, this is very common in modern software when you're dealing with code editors. It makes life a whole lot easier because you can, if you forget something exactly, you can probably find it in the menu if you're anywhere in the ballpark. So I know there's something to do with spreadsheet. Yeah, here it is right here. I can even click this read more button, spreadsheet app. That's the one I'm looking for. You can click it or you can type it all the way out. And then we're using what's called dot notation. So you can think of this sort of in terms of layers. We've got spreadsheet app, and that's layer 1. Well, within the spreadsheet app, whatever this is, an object or a method or whatever we might be dealing with, I'm not going to go into the weeds too much there, but within spreadsheet app, I've got all these other things that I can do. And if you scroll down the list, it's a lot of other things. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to get the active spreadsheet. And the most common way to do this is to just say get active and then do the parentheses because it doesn't require any parameters to be passed to it. So that's a long way to just say that we're getting a variable and we're making the variable equal to the active spreadsheet, which is the whole sheet, incidentally, not this tab, this sheet 1 that I'm on. If I had multiple sheets, it's not this sheet or this sheet. It's the whole workbook, the whole spreadsheet. So I'm getting the active spreadsheet. And then once we've got that, we do a semicolon on the end of the line. And the next line is where we start doing things. So I'm wanting to use that variable spreadsheet. So I'm saying spreadsheet, and then I'm using dot notation again. And in the same way that we got this spreadsheet app.getActive, we're doing get current cell offset 0015.activate. This is the way that it is using a relative reference to get the active cell, or excuse me, the current cell. Right here, it would be Q4. And then it is offsetting by 5 rows to the right, or 5 columns to the right, rather. That's how it's given me just those 5 cells to be affected, rather than just the one that I'm currently on. And then this activate function, or this activate method, if I go back here and I have the helper function and I have the helper window pull up, we can see the information on this. This is going to set that specified range as the active range. So if I had a cursor right here, it's simply the equivalent of me dragging over 5 cells. It's setting that to be active. So I'll put that back in there, do the semicolon. You can get away with not doing semicolons sometimes, but it is good practice, and you are supposed to put it at the end of a line, okay? Next line is more of the same. We're saying spreadsheet.getActiveRangeList, set font weight bold. So this is just a command, like it says literally, to set the font weight to bold. Then what's happening here, this is just some syntax stuff. We could have all this on one line. So these dot notations, you can string them together instead of saying spreadsheet.activeRangeList.set font bold weight, and then the next line, spreadsheet.activeRange. You don't have to do that. You can just string it all together if you're doing different things to the same range list. And that's exactly what's happening here. We're setting the font weight, setting the font size, setting the background to this hex code color. Now, the reason that we put it on separate lines is because code can get a little bit messy and unreadable. So this makes it easier just for a human to sit here and go down the list and read. And even I could argue that putting the set font weight bold down on its own line is an even better way to approach this, just for human readability. But it's absolutely not required. It'll run either way that you do this. Now, these 3 are all just style changes, and that's the entirety of this function. So that's a belabored way to just walk through what's going on here. Let's make our own function. So instead of doing the macros out in the spreadsheet and then coming in here and looking at it, because it's already built, Let's make style 2, and we're going to just write this out in much the same way by using some of what we learned up here, and then we'll just decide as we go what we want style 2 to do. So I'm going to say variable, and let's just say sheet this time. We could call it something different or the same because it's outside of the scope of the functions. You can't reuse variable names in the same function because it won't know which one you want to be using at any one time. Just for clarity's sake, I am not going to reuse it down here even though I could. So I'm going to do exactly what we did up above. I'm going to get active. That's going to be my sheet. And then on my sheet, I'm going to do this dot notation, and I'm going to say get active range list. So I'm not going to do that offset this time. I just want to have this style apply only to what I have explicitly highlighted in my spreadsheet. So I'm going to say get active range list. I'm going to come down here. What do you want to do to this? Let us set the background and let's just call it red. You can use a hex code. I'm just going to do red for simplicity's sake. I'm going to say set font style to italic. I'm going to say set font color to white. So just some more style changes here. We don't have to get crazy. Let me put my closing semicolon right there. Let's come back over to my sheet. So now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hold the control button down and I'm just going to click a couple different ranges. So I've got this A2 through B2, I've got D2, I've got C3 through D3, and then I've got A4 highlighted. So now I'm going to come up to extensions, macros, and we're not going to see it here yet because it only exists in our app script window right here. So unlike a macro that when you save it, it will automatically be written into the app script, when you write an app script, it will not automatically appear in your macro dropdown list. But we can import it if we want to access it from here. We'll see down here that there it is in our script, add function, close this out, come back up here to macros and look at that. There it is, style 2, running, and there's our changes made. Now we've got quite the messy spreadsheet here, but we've learned how to do both ways, to make a macro and then look at it in app script, to write a custom app script and have it appear in our macro list, and furthermore, how to have these keyboard shortcuts. I'll put one on style 2 right here. So Control Alt Shift 2, and let's just test that to make sure it's working like it's supposed to as a keyboard shortcut. There we go. Now, as you've guessed, we've only touched the surface barely of what's available to do inside of AppScript. So if you type in AppScript documentation, you're going to get to this Google developer page right here with about a zillion different things that you don't want to click on over here, because it's got all their workspace app information and everything. But you should be on AppScript down here in the bottom left-hand corner already if you came the way that I did to this page. Then it's a simple matter of making sure you click Reference right up here. That's the documentation page that I most use. And now we are somewhat in the right place. So now we've got all these Google Workspace services over here, including Sheets. Now, if you remember those methods that we were using in our apps script, the spreadsheet app dot get active, all that stuff, that came from within the Sheets section of this Google Workspace services. So if we click Sheets, then it has this huge drop-down list, and let's click the first item right here, this overview. And this is an overview of what's going on here. This service allows scripts to create, access, and modify Google Sheets files. Yeah, sounds like we're in the right place, right? And then it's got all these different classes. These are classes. This is not exactly what we used a second ago, but these will be used in the future. Let's open up this color class, for instance, and we see all this crazy stuff in here. This is a class color, and it's the representation for color inside Google Sheets Workspace services. Let's go back practically to what we've been working with, which is this spreadsheet app service right here. Ding. So if we select that, now we're getting somewhere. Now we've got, oh, here we go. Here's some methods. get active. This is now looking familiar. So now we have methods as well as properties that we can use in our app script inside of Google Sheets. And as you can see, there are quite a few. And inside each of these methods, so now let's come down to one we used. Let's take this get active sheet, and any of those that we click, it'll take us down to the definition of what this does, what is expected to return, and then, which we're not going to worry about as much for the sake of this course because we're just learning basics, it's going to give us the scope of authorization required. So basically how much permissions of the user using this is going to be required. Like, is it going to read the files in their Google Drive? Is it going to write to them? Is it going to delete them? This is where that security alert comes into play, and where if you're developing a big piece of software, especially for other people to use, you need to make sure that you're using basically the least amount of scope necessary to do what the purpose is of your script. So what we don't see in the spreadsheet app class are any of the things we just did, the simple stuff like editing the style. Instead, we look over here at all these class lists and we scroll down and we see one called sheet. And here's a lot of stuff that we'll use inside of spreadsheets. And these are different methods that we can use. Like here's one, get last row. If we want to go to the last row in our spreadsheet, there's a method for that. We don't have to write that ourselves. But if we go up right above that to range, here now are all of the different things that we can do to a range of cells. And indeed, here's where we have set background or set background object or set background RGB or set backgrounds plural. So we've got several different things we can do, methods we can use to set those background colors. Now this is just like touching the surface barely, but it lets you see where this data is coming from, where you can come in the actual documentation to find more information. And I hope it's helped you understand kind of what's going on in this code editor. We're going to get into more detail and more complex examples as the course goes on. This is the introduction. You're still in the right place. Thank you for sticking with this. Let me know how I can be of service to you. I love making these tutorials for people, showing them how to do this stuff. And I'm pretty darn accessible, so you can reach out via my newsletter, Got Sheet. Hope you have a great one. We'll see you in the next video.